Hey, welcome everyone to a very special live edition of the Data Ideas podcast. So, we're really excited about this. We actually want to welcome everyone that's joining from a variety of different places. So, we're broadcasting this to LinkedIn. We're also broadcasting this to our Data Career Summit YouTube page. So, for the followers of the Data Career Summit YouTube page, we want to welcome you as well. And then, if you're listening to the podcast later on, we're going to be publishing this through our normal release cadence to all major podcast platforms next Thursday. If you're listening there, welcome to you as well. So we're going to be talking about a topic today that evokes some emotion. It's a really important topic. There's some fear around it, but we also think you don't have to be afraid about AI. We want to help actually explain to you how you can use AI to actually be prepared for the future and benefit your career ultimately. So we've got some really great folks here to talk about this. I'm actually joined for the first time. I'm going to be co-hosting the Data Ideas podcast. So another new thing. We got lots of new stuff going on today. I'm co-hosting it with Brandy Beals, who many of you know also co-hosts the Data Career Summit with me. We're going to be kind of going back and forth in this interview, which is really fun. If you remember back, for those that attended the Data Career Summit, Brandy and I talked about some future collaborations we're going to be doing with the Data Ideas podcast and book club. This is one of them. So super excited for that. Brandy's smiling. For those listening to the podcast later, you can't see the smile on her face, but she's really excited about it. And then our guest today is someone that's the perfect person to talk about this topic. So we have Sunny Rivera, who's an analytics evangelist for ThoughtSpot, joining us today. And Sunny has a really storied career in technology and data and analytics. And is, like I said, just the perfect person to be talking to about this topic. So, Sunny, we'll turn it over right away to you here. You've had this incredible story, distinguished career in data analytics and tech. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your path and the roles you've had that have taken you to this pretty big role that you have right now in the technology space?
Well, yeah, thank you. And before I do that, thanks for having me. I'm really honored to be here with both you and Brandy. Dustin, that's amazing. So thank you for having me on the show. And I get to be a part of this early, adoption experiment that you're doing. So really pleased to be here. So early in my career actually goes back a while, right? So many of your listeners may remember the first Gulf War. And right before then, I was in college and I got recruited out of college to help in the defense industry. But I was still in college. I was like a junior in college, but I was developing defense systems. So if you can remember those first TV-guided weapons that we saw in the first Gulf War, that was me writing software to track the images, to steer the weapons, to put them into, the right destinations. So from there, I went on and started my own data modeling company, business process modeling and data modeling. And can you hear that? I'm so sorry. My dog came in and started making racket. Where was
You're proving the point that we are really trying to do this first live recording, right, Sunny? So it's a poetic introduction. Yes.
Well, so after that, I started my own business process and data modeling company. And I brought this to show you. This is our first product. This is funny. This is still shrink wrap. I think it's like third in the box. There's some 3.5-inch floppy disk in here,
Very cool.
And a license key in there for you to use, for someone to use. So that kind of got me started in the idea of data modeling. Unfortunately, our company wasn't terribly successful, but I moved on from there. And then I kind of got into building cloud data platforms with data and analytics and embedded analytics, enabling marketers and sellers to get market insights from all of these different data sources and provided those out to them through analytics tools. And I think the funny thing about that was when I started, I thought I was building a cloud enabled web application. And what it turned out I was building was a cloud data warehouse with embedded analytics, right? And so that kind of really put me headlong into data. It took all my software development skills and threw them into data. And so that's a little bit about me. And then recently, the last few years, I came to ThoughtSpot to really talk about data and provide some thought leadership around that space. And I'm totally enjoying it.
Very cool. Really interesting background. And appreciate you bringing your expertise, to this show today to talk about a really important topic. And I think we need to leverage folks that have the perspectives like yours and the background like yours to help kind of dissect this topic and think about it, not as emotionally, but more, logically, and like really think about just what are the most important things we need to know to let these new innovations benefit us going forward rather than be afraid of them. So excited to have you. I am curious, you started your own company kind of, it sounds like early on. It's you've always had, it feels like to me, this natural curiosity and desire to solve problems. Where did you always have that? Or like, where does it even go back further? Did you do stuff like this as a kid? Or like, how did you get interested in all this to start out with?
Yeah, I think it did start really, really early. I've always been a problem solver. I'm more information that you probably don't want to know. I'm one of 8. And so when there's 8 kids, it's like fend for yourself. You've got to solve these problems, logistics problems. How am I getting to football practice and back, and and pretty soon I'm scheduling out people's days. Like, okay, brother, you're doing this, this, and this. I'm here. I need you to pick me up at this time. So I think I was always that type. Somehow that, maybe that crept in. But I'm a problem solver. I write code for fun. That's kind of odd. It's a hobby of mine. So yeah.
No, I love that. And yeah, I think that's such a fun hobby to have. And I mean, I always think that working in data, it's very much like, puzzles. Anybody who really enjoys puzzles and working out stuff like that, yeah, it's really a great, industry to be in. I think it's also kind of like there's always something new, right? There's always a new challenge, a new thing to learn. And that actually brings us to the topic of the day, which is AI, right? This kind of new frontier. And I think we all know about ChatGPT kind of hitting the market last year, and there being a lot of hype around that. But just generally, I think in the past year or so, we've seen a huge surge in those AI capabilities. And I'm curious, from your perspective, did you have a sense that maybe this was coming, or what were some of the signals that maybe you saw in the industry that kind of where you kind of felt like that this explosion of AI might be around the corner?
I think when I first got started into this, and I've thought about it for a very long time. Back in the defense industry, when I was processing images and trying to issue steering commands and where are we going, it was just what I called the Russian army method. You run over it with enough tanks, it will submit. It was just a brute force method. And I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And that stayed with me. I never had a solution, but it stayed with me. And then in the mid, 2010s, I began to work with forecasting and predictions. And these were just business solutions. Like AAA wanted to know, hey, how many batteries are going to die today? So I know how many trucks to have. The it's winter or it's really hot. How many batteries are going to die? That means how many do I need to have on stock? And where do those trucks need to be? So just those sorts of things kind of got me started. And that was more, I would say, data science and not AI and ML type of things. And then I think what also happened was I have this curiosity, and I would advise other people to do this. Have fun with it. Make it fun. A great thing that I did that really helped me out was I enjoy making barbecue, right? And Dustin, you and I may have talked about this in the past. I love to make barbecue. And I said, well, it's a pain in the butt to get up in the middle of the night because it takes 18 hours to smoke this stuff and refuel. And what's the temperature? I don't know. So the first thing I did was build a device to capture the temperature of the smoker as well as the meat. I started streaming the data off and notifying myself, like, okay, the temperature's dropping, time to go refuel, right? And then I got into the thing of like, well, can't I just predict when I need to go out there? So I used the data and just started writing predictive models to say, hey, you're going to run out of this fuel at this time. And what are the drivers for that? Is it weather? Is it wind? Is it, what is it? And so that kind of started me down this path. I took something I enjoyed doing, barbecue, data and analytics, and mixed those things together. And I started building predictive models around that.
So I love that. I can relate to, first of all, I love to barbecue. And I think we did talk about that, Sonny. But the other thing, well, there's two other things that I like about that example. For one, so I can relate to the fact also that folks ask me, they ask Brandy, like, hey, what do you guys do for fun? And yeah, there's things we do for fun outside of the data world, but also like we do a lot of data stuff for fun. Like this, what we're doing right now is one example of it, right? And so, but then there's the other lesson here, I think, and that is something that we share with folks when folks ask like, hey, I'm in a certain job right now that's not related to data and analytics. Like, how do I transfer from that job, as let's say a supply chain manager to being an analyst, or, a hardcore finance role to being a data analyst or something like that. I'll say just start to be an analyst, like in your current role, or, start building some models that like you did for the barbecue example, like start doing stuff that'll actually solve a problem today for you. And you can do that in your job at your company, and add value through it, and then have the courage to show that to other folks internally. And you'll be surprised where you go, because so few people will do that. And I think you're going to find yourself in a new line of work in a positive manner very quickly when you do things like that.
Yeah, Dustin, as a guy that hired people, I loved hiring second career individuals into the data field, right? People that were accountants, or maybe people that were in supply chain, and pulling them into the data field. Absolutely loved it. What it did was, they usually had degrees. They knew how to work. They were professionals, right? Now they needed to get up to speed on some analytic skills or that sort of thing. So that was great. And I also partnered with teams or the local universities that were doing boot camps, right? Love to grab people out of boot camps. Again, usually second career. They know how to be a professional. They're dedicated. They've gone through this effort of going through a boot camp. It shows a lot of initiative, and I would encourage people to do that, especially as education around technology, data, and AI is changing. It's different than maybe getting a degree in AI versus a boot camp. And I think these are happening really fast. And I think a lot of companies are looking that way.
I love that. Awesome advice and perspective. I think will be beneficial for many listening, especially on the Data Career Summit side of the broadcast here. Very cool. Let's switch over. You started to talk a little bit about the AI side of things. Let's switch over to that. And specifically the impact that it's having on individuals right now. What are as you think about some of the big impacts that AI is having down at it's having a lot of impact all over the place and at the organizational level, right? But down to the individual level, what are today, let's start with current state, the big impacts that it's having down at that individual level?
Well, I think there's no doubt that people may be scared, but I don't think there's any need to be afraid. I think what there's a need to be is proactive and be prepared, right? I mean, it's natural to be concerned about that, but I would say be proactive, be prepared. And obviously your audience is doing that. They're here today, they're listening, they're being proactive. Some of the big changes I think that you've seen is on the individual level. Analysts, I think, are seeing and will see more kind of upheaval. And they're going to be able to focus themselves on maybe the higher order magnitude or the higher value opportunities to add value to their company, to have a greater impact on their company. That's one of the big areas, right? So if you're just focused on building dashboards, you probably are going to struggle as this new digital economy arises. But if you can take that and say, how do I use AI to have a bigger impact, or how do I use it as a tool? And so I think the other big thing we're seeing is analysts embracing AI, Gen AI, these things as a tool to assist them. And I will bet you will see more and more of that, more assistance than, say, the threat of taking over your job. I don't know about you, Dustin. I have a relatively new car. It doesn't drive itself. It does assist me, tells me when I'm going in the wrong lane, tells me when I'm trying to park, if I'm going to run into the car next to me, but it doesn't take over. It hasn't taken over driving. It's been assisting me, right? So I think that's probably a good analogy. Other things that I think we are seeing, on the day-to-day basis is people are going from maybe high touch, code first solutions to low code and no code solutions. And I think you'll see more and more of that. Individuals having to deal with, and to deal with these types of solutions. ThoughtSpot has a low code solution, right? You're not writing, it's built for non-technical business users that can ask a question and get an answer. Mode, which is a great company and a great product that we acquired this summer, was more of a code first approach, but they've just released their AI assistant to help write code, write SQL, and assist those things. So I think you'll see more and more, and that's what we're seeing in the marketplace.
That makes a ton of sense. And I don't know if you built a predictive model to determine whether, Dustin just bought a new car or not. But if you did, it was pretty darn good, because I actually did about a month ago. And that analogy is a good one. I mean, I was thinking as you were talking, it didn't replace me as a driver. And actually, my kids have been asking me questions like, hey, can this thing self-drive? Because they see all the new tech in it and all the bells and whistles, right? But I say, no, it doesn't. But you know what? It's doing a lot of things that I didn't have in a car 20 years ago. It's telling me if there's someone in a passing lane next to me. It's alerting me if there's movement directly in front of me while I'm backing in or out or whatever, And so it's making me a better driver, but it's not replacing me as a driver. And I think that's the point that you're making with that analogy. Is that how people should be thinking about AI in the context of their role as a professional?
Yeah, I think you need to think of it as a tool. You need to embrace it as a tool that can help you be adaptive, be flexible. And that's where we're seeing people with the most success. I also think that we've got this new paradigm out there. Like, Dustin, Brandy, think about, you're working with a business stakeholder, right? What does it now mean for you to be working with a business stakeholder and an AI? Right. And there's this new model of being able to not only trust Brandy to understand our business, but the AI, the Gen AI that we're using, the data that we're using. So we've always struggled in the data space with trust, right? Get one number wrong and watch what happens. Oh, I can't trust you. So trust is a huge factor here. And so having that tool, being able to create a trust model where your stakeholders trust you, you're transparent that you're using AIs to help you, and they can trust the information that comes from that. So that would be one of those things. The last thing I'll say about that, Dustin, is why don't I let my car drive for me? I don't trust it. Right.
Totally. Absolutely. And I mean, I think there's an element there of, the trust evolves over time, and slowly you probably trust things more and more the more that you see the demonstrated capabilities like being well implemented and utilized. And I think I don't trust it to drive myself. I certainly don't trust it to drive my family, and so there's this natural curve to it as well. So I think it's also important to remember where we're at there. I love the analogy. I do see some folks saying hello from where they're joining from. It's really cool to see folks joining from all over the world. I just want to pause and say that. And continue to introduce yourself. We always love to see where you're coming from. I think, Brandy, you've got the next question here, but I did just want to pause and encourage folks to say hi. It's really cool to see where you're coming from.
It definitely is. We all appreciate it. So I mean, talking about, AI assisting folks, in driving, but also, in their day jobs and within their organizations. And curious to get your thoughts on how individuals can benefit from using AI to improve their personal value proposition as a professional within their organizations. But then, we kind of started down this path a little bit, but also what are the things that they need to be doing to like watch out for, right? Doesn't necessarily seem like it's black and white, like you can fully trust it or you have to be fully skeptical. So like, what's that right balance look like?
Yeah, I think we're all being thrown in the deep end really quickly, right? And so things that you can do that are going to help your career, one, recognize that within your organization, not everyone is aware of how these AI technologies can help them. And so you have the opportunity to provide some leadership in this chaos. I myself am going through an AI certification now, just so, personally to try to be better at this so that I can share it with the organization. I would also say, whatever, sharing is caring here, right? So when your value, Dustin, your value, Brandy, is not, from my perspective, is not what you know. It's what you share. It's what you make, you use with your team and make your teams better. So take what you're learning, your experiences, and share those with others. I also think, like I said, leadership doesn't necessarily have a full understanding of how they can leverage AI. And folks that are near the front line of the business, I always think there's a ton of value in companies by talking to the front line folks. So folks that are near the front line understand what's happening. You guys, your audience, you're near the front lines every day because you know what drives the business. So take that and start to look. Hey, is my industry ripe for change? Are things, maybe not my industry, but my particular vertical. So maybe there's an industry you're in that's not up for change in the near term, but you're in marketing. Well, marketing is going to see a lot of changes in the very near future. So understand what areas of your industry are changing. Are you in that? What area of your business is changing? Are in that? And then where you can add value to that, because you have a lot of experience. The reality is these AIs are assisting us, but humans are still pulling the levers. So I think not AI, but analytics in general has gotten into maybe a little bit of a vicious cycle of analytics for analytics. So focus on outcomes and focus on impact, right? And when you do that, that's going to help your career immensely.
Very cool. Totally. No, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so we're talking a lot about, and I think these are really good examples of, thinking of how to use some of the new technologies as a tool to make you a better professional, how you can use them to actually drive business objectives and better outcomes for your organizations, which I think is absolutely the right way to think about it. And I would encourage folks, like you were saying, think about what the outcome is. Like, what's pie in the sky? What's something that you would really like for your organization? And think about how you can use some of these new technologies and tools to meet those objectives and kind of be the person that puts together a recipe, to make that happen. Again, I think for folks that do that, they're few and far between. And you find yourself in a very different position professionally if you're the person that can be the expert on putting those recipes together. I'm curious, Sonny, from your standpoint, I think also folks can add value. I'm curious your thoughts on this, from kind of like being that trusted person that is keeping up on these things and knows enough about them to advise even on how to even if they're not putting the recipes together, be the person that advises on it. Who are some of the folks that you follow? So you're a leader in this field yourself, right? And so like people should follow you, for sure. But like also like, who is Sonny following? Like, who are people that people should be thinking about following themselves?
Yeah, a couple of folks I follow. Excuse me, Andrew Ng, if you're familiar with him. Mm-hmm. He's one of the founders of Coursera. He's a founder of Deep Learning. Has great courses. If you're looking for maybe a longer term, because some of those Coursera specializations take a long time to do. I did one of them. It was 10 courses. It took me almost a year to complete that. He's amazing. I love what he has to say. I love to hear his perspective. Amit Prakash, who is one of the founders at ThoughtSpot, and he cut his chops at Google from cut his teeth at Google, if you will, doing AI and ML there before founding ThoughtSpot. So I follow him a good bit. Let's see, who else am I listening to? Those are probably the two biggest. I don't necessarily follow the Sam Altmans of the world. I do listen, he's in the news a lot. But I'm really looking for the folks that are have their hands on it a little bit more. I think of Sam Altman really as leading the company, not the technical leader in that space. Although I'm not, no shade toward him. He's a very intelligent individual.
Yeah. And actually, thank you for sharing those things. I mean, it's always good to know what there's so many resources out there. So knowing the ones that like other people have found value in are really great. I would also encourage other people who are maybe tuning in and listening to share the resources that you found really helpful as well. But actually, Sunny, if you're open to it, one of our people who are tuning in actually had a question for you, which is about the AI certification that you're doing. If you're willing to share with us what that is, we'd love to know.
Yeah, it is. I've actually just started on the first course from Google. If you go to Google and look at their AI certification, they have a whole series of courses. So I just started on their very first one of using LLMs and their Workbench. So. Yeah. But I intend to do multiples of those. And they do have a package that's, hey, do all of these and you get this badge. I'm probably haven't gotten there. I'm still thinking individual, maybe targeted areas that I'm looking at. And actually the first thing I'm doing, I am pretty, whatever. I'm experienced. I don't want to say I'm advanced. I'm experienced in some of these AI techniques. But I started with 101 just to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Right? Mm-hmm. How should I be thinking about those?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
That's really great. Thank you. And I think, just to maybe dive down into that a little bit more, you talk about Google, we've kind of talked about OpenAI, lots of different technology or companies out there have their own AI products. And I guess, do you see that maybe they also take different approaches to AI and that there's different like strengths and weaknesses across them? And like, obviously Google, you've mentioned their course, you've also mentioned Coursera and Andrew Ng, and it's, I think there's probably different flavors. Is that an accurate way to think about some of these, both courses, but also AI tools?
Yeah, I think there's different opportunities for you to look at, like, do you want to write code to build models? Right, that's one thing, and that does take a good bit of skill. Do you want to know how to use these tools to get the most out of them? Right, and that's a different set of tools, right? So I think there's some first principles. If you think about, I'm kind of a first principles kind of guy. I want to know nuts and bolts, how things work from the ground up. Other folks are saying, hey, I'm going to abstract that piece away. I really want to know how to use, this is applied AI. So how can I use this? And what are the best ways to do that? And we see, some courses that are focusing on, for lack of a better term, prompt engineering, which I don't think is a bad thing. Right? How do I, interact with these LLMs? How do I create prompts to get me closer and closer to a more valuable answer? Or maybe more specifically, how do I fine tune this particular LLM? How do I customize it for what I'm doing? So I think you'll find, long answer, I think you'll find courses that go all the way from writing code, like Andrew Ng is going to have you writing Python, building your own models from scratch, and then saying, oh, at the end, you could have just used this library over here, but I wanted to show you how to build it all, right? And then there's going to be others that are going to say, hey, here's how to use this. Here's some things to do.
I love that. And actually, Brandy, I just will take a pause here. I want to say hello to some folks that have shared where they're joining from, but also Brandy, I think the comments around prompts are interesting. I mean, it's just something where you and I use this as a tool for planning our marketing and some of our stuff around the Data Careers Summit and things like that. And so just one really simple example of how we're using one of these tools, right, to make ourselves better with what we're doing. Brandy, I know you're really big into this too. Like, do you have any other things to share about that?
I think that there's a lot of different tools out there, and playing around with each one of them will give you a really great sense of where their strengths and weaknesses lie. I think that's probably tip number one. Like, it can be overwhelming. Anything that you learn can be overwhelming, but just get started and try to use it for, some day-to-day stuff. So, I do use some of these tools to write some of my emails. And I do love to give it like context, like, I'm operating in this capacity. Here are the things that I care about. And I need, the recipient of this email to, understand X, Y, and Z or whatever. And then, take that exact message and use it in, Chat GPT, use it in Google's, is it like Google Labs or something like that? Or like use it in Bing Chat, or like all of these different tools, and see what the different outcomes are. And definitely play around with it, and play around with it within your industry as well. Use it as a tool to come up with ideas for, team building activities, or an agenda for a meeting, or, any kind of thing where, you can even ask it questions around, hey, I'm in this industry, I'm in this position at my company, and we're looking to use AI more. Give me some examples of things that would actually be valuable there. So I don't know, those are, I use it, I just try to incorporate it in my day-to-day as much as I can, where I think maybe to Sunny's point earlier, doesn't require a lot of expertise on my part. It's something that I can just, I can focus my expertise on, editing the response, and not so much the, initial creation of the ideas or something like that. So
Totally.
Dustin, can I jump in on that? I'm going to say,
Please.
I love what you're doing, Brandy. And I do. So there's a lot of blogs out there. There's a lot of things I want to read, but I may not have time. It got a catchy title. I just cut and paste it into an LLM and say, give me the highlights. But I also tell them the prompt who I am. I'm a data leader. I'm a CEO. In other words, tell me the highlights from that perspective. And that helps me kind of get through things quickly. And it may be, I want to dig into this a little bit deeper, right? And actually read it first person versus, pull the 4 or 5 bullets out of it.
Yeah, no, but that context, that what you're talking about there is so important, and adds a lot of value, I think, to the types of responses and the quality of responses that you'll get from these tools, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Someone could actually take our podcast recording or the YouTube recording, and use one of these tools and ask for the highlights from it from their perspective, as an executive or a CFO or whatever, and get a summary of it. So there's a practical way to practice this if you haven't done it so far. And I think you'll find that the summary that you get back would be pretty darn interesting. All right. I want to say hello to take a pause for a second, because there's some folks that said hello, and I think it's really cool to we have everyone coming from all over the place here. So hello to you in Ghana.
Wow.
Hello, Paul, coming from Ireland. We have Abdur Rahim coming from Nigeria. Hello. Eldon coming from the Netherlands. We have Austin from North Carolina. Hello. Naveen from India. We have someone, sorry, I can't see what your name is here, but coming from Ontario, Canada. Our home state of Wisconsin. Hey, Sonny, so we've got someone here from Wisconsin. I was thinking, when you're talking about your model for barbecue, have you figured out like the perfect way to cook a bratwurst? That's something that we would probably be most interested in here in Milwaukee.
I have not, and because I'm in the deep South, if it ain't pork, it ain't barbecue.
Oh, okay. Utah, Texas, awesome. So I just want to say hello to everyone. Feel free to continue to shout out where you're coming from. It's really always interesting and exciting to us to see folks coming from all over. Naveen is actually doing exactly what I mentioned. He's recording this, and so I think maybe we'll see send us what the insights are. We'd love to see that. Yes. Love it. Ron's he liked that one from Sunny there, and he's coming from Mile High City. All right, cool. And then also too, if you folks are seeing, if you have resources that you want to share, that you follow on AI trends and education, please do put those in the comments or share those out. Give us a tag. We'd love to be part of the discussion and know what those resources are ourselves so that we can follow them too. All right. Okay. So moving forward here, thinking more, we've talked a lot about current state of things, moving towards as we think about the future, the next few years and even beyond. Sunny, aside from like following folks that are experts in the field right now, like, are there things that really that you are on your mind that folks should be thinking about in terms of how they just prepare for changes and that evolution, as we were talking about earlier, and capabilities? Like, I guess, are there certain things that you're like, what, this is for sure coming in the next couple of years, and professionals need to be aware of it and planning for it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, I would say, as I understand your audience, you're in the right space. There is no AI strategy without a data strategy. AI depends on the data that comes from professionals like your audience, right? Whether that's data engineers or analysts or analytics engineers, all of these folks. When I think about this, like I said, data kind of is the bottleneck to some of these AI challenges that we have right now. People need more data, so you're in the right place from that perspective. Like I said, be constructive, be prepared, prepare yourself. What else? What was the first part of your question? I think I started talking about how important data was to AI, and I forgot what your original question was. I'm so sorry.
No, you were absolutely answering it. So it was really just thinking of like, are there things that for sure folks should be thinking about, where you're like, okay, from Sunny's perspective, like, this is going to happen and you need to be prepared for it?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things, and I think they are happening right now. One, I think analytics is becoming invisible, right? You're seeing and it's not just chatbots embedded into your tools, but it's the analytics that are being embedded into the tools and into the workflows that are happening. People can, they hit Salesforce, they're getting analytics that comes from all over, right? They're using tools like whatever, ThoughtSpot, embedding it into their process for their customers. So I think analytics is becoming invisible. I think the impacts are becoming more impactful. That piece is happening. Definitely low code is happening. Low code, no code is happening more and more and more. And self-service. So when you get to the point where you can have self-service analytics, because many of us data professionals have had this kind of downward spiral of ask a question, get an answer. Oh, I really meant this. Can you reslice it this way? Those are really non-productive types of uses of your experience and your skills. So if you can make that self-service and go on to the higher order task, higher impact task, I think you see that happening more and more and more.
And from a leader standpoint, if you're a leader that's not very technical, there's someone listening that's at that CFO, C-level, position up to CEO, and they're like, okay, this everything is evolving very rapidly. It's data and analytics, and tech has been evolving really rapidly. And they've had to, I think many that don't have the backgrounds in those areas have been having to think about a strategy for those things, which I'm sure is challenging, and you have to rely on experts for help on that. Now we have AI and machine learning and all these new things that are continuing to evolve rapidly and come into the picture front and center at the business level. Like, what advice would you have for leaders of an organization to navigate these waters and make sure that they're staying at or ahead of the curve in terms of what they need to know and how they need to lead with these new capabilities?
Well, I think it does go back to something I said a little bit earlier when I was talking about individuals, but it applies to organizations as well. One, there's no industry that is not going to be impacted. right? So know what industry you're in and when is it likely to be impacted, right? Some may or may not be impacted sooner or later. So I think that's important to recognize, and then start to say, okay, envision, if I'm impacted, what does that mean for me? Does it mean, lower cost of building whatever it is I build? Does it mean a higher cost? Does it mean I'm going to have challenges getting talented resources? And the reality in the data space, it's hard to find good data resources, and that is not going to go away anytime soon. So another good note for your audience, there may be some challenges in other areas where automation is impacting jobs greater than in ours. But in ours right now, I think there is a need for people that understand data, understand automation. So that this group should be less worried, I think. But I also think, back to your question, you've got to look at, organizations have got to look at kind of their outcomes in the next 2 years, and not get stuck in this loop of thinking strategically, doing a tactical thing, thinking strategically, and oscillating back and forth between strategic and tactical. Figure out what that is and drive hard for it.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. I think context switching is tough. Trying to do all the things is tough. So thank you for giving us all permission to focus on one area. One, I guess, final question that I have around AI before we start to kind of wrap up our conversation today. It was actually asked by one of our listeners as well, but I'm going to maybe kind of reframe it slightly. I think one of a very common use case for AI is actually in the hiring and application process, right? There are absolutely, machine learning models or AI out there looking at applications and helping HR professionals and recruiters kind of sift through all of that in order to get, candidates fit for their position. But if we were to flip that around, how can people who are applying for jobs use AI to their benefit?
Yeah. So one thing, first of all, I would say anytime you're looking for a job, be a part of a community. I'm a big community guy. I'm part of the Snowflake community. I'm part of a DBT community. I'm part of the ThoughtSpot community. I'm involved in the SIM, which is the Society for Information Management. This is data leaders here in this particular region. So be involved in the community, because there's nothing greater than your networks there. When it comes to how can you get better, how can you get AI to notice you, right? Because, we all know if we're sending out resumes, that sort of thing, they're first being scanned by AIs, right? So one thing might be to do is take your resume and put it through an LLM and say, what would make this better? Literally ask, what would you like to see? You're a hiring manager. What would you like to see? I would be interested to see how that pans out. I actually do that with my some of my blogs. I'll write a blog and say, what is this missing? And GPT will say, hey, you probably could have a stronger example here. This is a little weak. And it'll tell me the area that's weak. Okay, let me go do that. So I would think about that. I also think about having a portfolio of work that you've done. Anytime you have a portfolio, put it on GitHub, share that portfolio in your resume, right? I think those kind of things will help out. I haven't put a lot of thought in how do I become a bigger signal? How do I separate my signal from the noise of all the other folks? I haven't thought about that too much, but those things jump to the top of my mind.
Yeah, no, the example of taking your resume and putting it probably also with the job description and saying, and again, it's a great opportunity to use and put into practice the things that we've talked about or that you've shared today, Sunny. Give the AI some context about who you are, the type of role you're in, the type of role you want to be in. Say, here's a job that I'm applying for, and here's my resume. Give me feedback or how I can improve. I love that.
Can I add? And this just thought just jumped up to me. When I'm looking at resumes, one thing I look at is the things that you've done, but the impact that you've had, right? And so having just a list of activities that I've performed is not nearly as valuable to me as having those impacts. So make sure that on your resume that you show the impact that those activities have had. It's great to know that you've worked with this particular LLM or this particular, I'm a Tableau expert here. Well, what did you do for the business and what impact did it have?
Yeah. And I think to that point, you can use like an LLM to help you tease out some of those things or come up with some ideas on how can you, convey the work that you've done in a certain area with some sort of like impact. So absolutely love that. Thank you for answering that question. So, we're 45 minutes into our awesome conversation here. Lots of really wonderful insights and nuggets of information. One thing I did want to ask is, ThoughtSpot, the company that you work for, is releasing their ebook on 2024 predictions. I'm hoping maybe to learn a little bit more about what we can expect from that. Maybe how do we get it? All of those fun things.
So our predictions, and we do this every year. We do predictions for the following year. Our ebook will be released the week of December 12th. So I think that's just next week. I don't want to get out in front of it too much about what's in it, but take a look at what we've done in prior years and you might see some interesting things. But this ebook is a collaboration between myself, Cindy Howson, and someone you guys may know, Ben Stansel, who's one of the founders of Mode. It was really great writing these and getting perspectives from folks like Cindy, who's a long-term veteran in this industry, knows it's probably forgotten more about business intelligence than I'll ever know. And Ben, who has this really great insights and really understands how to tease out an idea. So it was really great working with them. The thing I love about these things is we kind of talk about, here's a prediction, but here's how to go deeper. Like, hey, check out these resources to learn more, make these resolutions for your company that'll help you. So those are kind of some of the things. I do have a couple of questions that, we've seen over the years. We've done one of the predictions was about data scientist is the sexiest job. And then came analytics and engineers was the sexiest job. What's the next sexiest job in data? And so maybe that comes out in there. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. Yeah. But very I would cool. Encourage you all.
Sunny, how can folks, you mentioned this coming out on December 12th, it sounded like?
Yes.
And we'll certainly link to this in the show notes and share it out for you. But is this free or how can folks get it?
Yeah, it's free. It's not gated. It'll be on our website, thoughtspot.com. And you'll be able to just download it. It's actually will be an HTML book, ebook. So it'll be on the site, thoughtspot.com. I'm sure we'll be promoting it. So you should see it drop that week. And I will definitely get you the link to, directly to the asset so you can put it in the show notes.
Very cool. Awesome. And also you made some recommendations on folks to follow in this space. We'll for sure put links to those folks in the show notes too. I think those were some really good resources. Also, Sunny, as we wind down here, how can folks follow you and the stuff that you're working on?
All right. Well, you can always find me on LinkedIn. So if you look at Sunny Rivera, you can find me on LinkedIn. If you Google me on YouTube, you'll probably find my videos on barbecue and streaming data and making predictions there. You can also find me on ThoughtSpot's website because I write a blog for ThoughtSpot. Usually there's something published there at least once a month, usually once or twice a month. But you can find me there. And then, of course, you can find me on Twitter, RQ Rivera. And you can find me on Twitter.
Very cool. Awesome. So we will put links to everything mentioned in the show notes. Some really, really good resources and amazing insights. I think a lot of them I were aware of, but then I also took notes myself and I learned from you. And actually, my blood pressure on this whole topic of AI went down, and I found myself thinking to the future and how I can use some of the recommendations you made to make myself better as a data and analytics professional. And I have no doubt that others felt the same. If you have thoughts, if you were listening to this, or even if down the road you're listening to the podcast episode and something stood out to you that you want to share with others, share it out and take us to it. I'm sure any of us on this discussion would love to join the discussion and respond back. Anything you disagreed with too, put it out there, and we'd love to be part of that conversation as well. So let's keep the conversation going beyond just this 45 or 50 minutes that we had. Also, Cindy made a nice comment here. Take a look at the link that she put in the comments as well to last year's version of the ebook that Sunny was talking about. But we'll also be sure to put the latest in there once it's available. So thank you, Cindy, for sharing that. Very cool. So Sunny, I just want to thank you so much for joining and sharing from your wealth of expertise. You've had such a distinguished and storied career in our field, and it's so valuable. Like I said, for myself as well. I'm sure Brandy too, to listen. I have a whole page of notes by my side.
Well, it's an honor to be here. Great to talk to both of you. Great talking to you, Brandy and Dustin. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. All right. Thanks everyone for joining. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next podcast episode. Bye now.